The most dangerous person in any room isn't the angriest. It's the one who feels absolutely nothing, while everyone else gets swept up in drama and chaos. These emotionally detached individuals operate on a completely different level. But what makes their indifference so terrifyingly powerful? You know, that person who never seems fazed by anything. The one who watches drama unfold around them with the same expression they'd have reading a grocery list. They're everywhere once you start noticing them. In coffee shops, they order their drink without a smile or thank you. At work meetings, they deliver bad news like they're discussing the weather. Even when everyone else is celebrating a big win, they just stand there. These emotionless people have a weird superpower. They make everyone else feel like they're overreacting to life. While you're stressed about a deadline, they're calm. While you're excited about weekend plans, they're indifferent. It's almost unsettling how untouchable they seem. What makes them so noticeable isn't what they do, it's what they don't do. Most of us leak emotions constantly. So our faces light up when we see a cute dog. We frown when stuck in traffic. We roll our eyes at bad jokes, but not them. Their facial expressions stay frozen in neutral mode, like someone hit the pause button on their feelings. Then there's their voice. Have you ever tried having an animated conversation with someone who responds in monotone? It's like trying to play tennis against a wall. You serve up enthusiasm, and they return it flat. They could be telling you about winning the lottery or losing their job, and both stories would sound exactly the same. No excitement, no disappointment, just facts delivered in that eerily steady tone. But here's where it gets really interesting. Praise bounces off them, like water off a duck's back. Tell them they did great work, and they might nod once, maybe say okay, and move on. Criticism doesn't land either. You could point out their mistakes, and they'll process it like you just told them the time. No defensiveness, no hurt feelings, no visible reaction at all. People often describe being around them as cold or uncomfortable, not because they're mean, they're usually not. They just feel unreachable, like there's an invisible barrier between them and the rest of the world. You can't quite put your finger on why, but something feels off. Strangers pick up on this energy immediately. In social situations, these individuals stick out like someone wearing a winter coat to the beach. While everyone else is laughing, sharing stories, getting worked up about sports or politics, they observe. They might participate in conversations, but there's no spark behind their words, no genuine enthusiasm bubbling up. The weird part is how this affects everyone around them. Their emotional flatness creates a strange dynamic. Some people try harder to get a reaction out of them, like it's a personal challenge. Others feel judged, assuming the emotionless person thinks they're being silly or dramatic. A few find it refreshing. Finally, someone who won't add to the chaos of feelings swirling around. Watch them during intense moments, and you'll see what I mean. When everyone else gasps at shocking news, they don't even blink. During horror movies, while others jump and scream, they sit still. At funerals, they attend but don't cry. At weddings, they show up but don't tear up during the vows. It's like they're watching life through bulletproof glass. Their body language tells the same story. Most of us gesture when we talk, lean in when interested, step back when uncomfortable. We hug, high five, pat shoulders. Physical touch and movement come naturally when we're feeling something. But emotionless people often stand rigid. Their hands stay at their sides. They maintain the same distance from others, regardless of the situation. What's fascinating is how consistent this behavior stays across different environments. They're the same at parties as they are at work, the same with family as with strangers, the same during good times and bad. Most of us shift our emotional expression depending on where we are and who we're with, but they remain steady, always steady. This consistency makes them memorable. People remember the person who didn't laugh at the joke everyone else found hilarious. They remember who stayed calm during the office crisis. They remember the one who seemed unimpressed by the surprise party thrown in their honor. Some find this intimidating. There's something unsettling about not being able to read someone's emotional temperature. When you can't tell if someone likes you, is angry with you, or even notices you, it creates an odd power dynamic. They become untouchable, not through aggression or attitude, but through sheer emotional absence. Others are drawn to this quality, especially those tired of emotional drama. There's something appealing about someone who won't overreact, won't create scenes, won't burden you with their feelings. They represent stability in a world that often feels emotionally chaotic. But what's really happening behind that blank expression? Are they truly feeling nothing, or is something else going on? The surface behavior is just the beginning of understanding what makes someone emotionless. When people hear emotionless, they picture robots in movies or that one coworker who never laughs at office jokes. But here's the thing, real emotionless behavior isn't about being a machine, it's way more complex than that. Someone who's truly emotionless doesn't wake up one morning and decide to stop caring. They simply have trouble showing what's happening inside their head. Their feelings might be there, locked away somewhere, but getting those emotions from their brain to their face or voice, that's where things break down. It's like having a computer with a broken screen. The software might be running, but you can't see what's happening. Watch how they handle big news. Your average person hears they got promoted and jumps around the office. They find out their dog died and tears start flowing. But emotionless people, they process everything the same way. Good news, bad news, shocking news, it all gets the same treatment. Pure logic. No celebration dance, no crying, just a calm. Okay, what do I need to do about this? Their conversations sound different too. While most people pepper their speech with "that's amazing," or "how awful," or "I'm so excited," emotionless individuals stick to facts. They'll say things like "that seems efficient," instead of "that's fantastic." When you tell them your vacation was incredible, they might respond with "the weather was probably good for outdoor activities." Not mean, not rude, just neutral, always neutral. The weird part is how they handle other people's emotions. Most of us automatically mirror what we see. My friend looks sad, we feel concerned. Coworker gets angry, we either get defensive or try to help. But emotionless people often miss these cues entirely. They'll keep talking about weekend plans while their friend is clearly upset about a breakup. Not because they're cruel, that often, though genuinely don't pick up on emotional signals the way others do. Then there's the physical stuff. High fives feel awkward to them. Hugs are endured rather than enjoyed. Even handshakes might be quick and mechanical. They're not trying to be standoffish. Physical expressions of emotion just don't come naturally. It's like asking someone who's never danced to suddenly break into a waltz. The steps don't make sense to them. Here's what makes it tricky. Some emotionless people do feel things internally. They might love their family deeply, or feel genuinely sad about world events, but translating those feelings into expressions others can recognize, that's the missing link. Their emotional vocabulary is limited, like trying to paint a sunset with only black and white paint. The beauty might be there in their mind, but they can't show it to anyone else. Others genuinely experience emotions differently. Their internal emotional landscape might actually be flatter, quieter. Imagine if your emotional volume dial was permanently set to 2 out of 10. Good things feel mildly pleasant. Bad things register as slightly inconvenient. Everything exists in this narrow band of fine and okay. Let's not forget the language patterns. Emotionless people love words like adequate, functional and acceptable. They rarely use love or hate. Instead, everything is preferred or not preferred. They might say that movie was well constructed instead of "I loved that movie." Even their compliments sound like performance reviews. The challenge comes when life demands emotional responses. Job interviews where they need to show enthusiasm. Relationships where partners want warmth and affection. Social situations where everyone's bonding over shared excitement or outrage. They're like actors who never learned the script everyone else seems to know by heart. But here's the fascinating part. Many emotionless people develop incredibly sophisticated logical frameworks for navigating the world. Since they can't rely on emotional instincts, they create detailed mental maps of how social situations work. They might not feel empathy naturally, but they can learn to recognize when someone needs comfort and respond appropriately, even if it feels mechanical to them. What's particularly interesting is how this affects their decision-making. While most people wrestle with emotions when making choices, fear, excitement, anxiety, hope, front, emotionless individuals just weigh pros and cons. Should they take the new job? Here are the facts. Should they end the relationship? Here's the logical analysis. No sleepless nights agonizing over feelings, just data and conclusions. The real question becomes, is this emotional flatness something that happened to them? Or is it just how they're wired? Because understanding the why behind emotionless behavior changes everything about how we see these people and what might be possible for them. What turns a person into someone who barely shows any emotion at all? Well, it's rarely something they choose. Most emotionless people didn't wake up one day and decide to shut down their feelings forever. Something happened. Something big enough to make them build walls so high that even they can't climb over them anymore. Trauma sits at the top of this list, and for good reason. When life hits you hard enough, your brain does something clever but devastating. It flips the emotional off switch. Think about it this way. If touching a hot stove burns you, you stop touching hot stoves. If feeling emotions leads to unbearable pain, your mind learns to stop feeling them. Makes sense, right? But here's the twisted part. What starts as protection becomes a prison. A kid who gets screamed at every time they cry eventually stops crying altogether. An adult who loses someone they love might decide that caring that much isn't worth the risk. The brain doesn't ask permission for this shutdown. It just happens like a circuit breaker that never gets reset. Then there's chronic stress, which works differently but ends up in the same place. Imagine your emotional system like a car engine. Run it at maximum speed for months or years without a break, and eventually something's going to burn out. People dealing with constant financial pressure, toxic relationships, or impossible work demands often find their feelings just disappear. They describe it like watching their life through glass. They can see everything happening, but they can't really touch it, or be touched by it. Mental health disorders throw another wrench into the works. Depression doesn't just make people sad, it can make them feel nothing at all. Anxiety can be so overwhelming that the mind shuts down emotions entirely just to survive. Some conditions, like certain personality disorders, seem to dim the emotional lights from birth. These aren't character flaws or personal failures. They're medical realities that change how someone experiences the world. Childhood neglect creates a particularly cruel type of emotionless person. Kids who grow up in homes where feelings are ignored, mocked, or punished learn a brutal lesson. Emotions are dangerous. They become experts at hiding what they feel, sometimes so well that they lose track of their own feelings completely. A child who never gets comforted when they're scared learns that being scared doesn't matter. A kid whose excitement is always met with indifference eventually stops getting excited. Let's not forget family patterns, because emotions or the lack of them can run in families like eye color or height. Some of this might be genetic, but most of it is learned behavior. Watch how your parents handle feelings, and you'll probably see your own emotional blueprint. Families that treat crying like weakness, anger like danger, and joy like foolishness tend to produce children who grow into emotionally distant adults. The weird part is how this emotional numbness spreads. One emotionally shut down parent can create an entire household where feelings become forbidden territory. Kids in these homes learn that the safest way to survive is to become invisible emotionally. They master the art of not needing anything, not wanting anything, not feeling anything that might rock the boat. But why do some people bounce back from terrible experiences while others shut down completely? The answer often comes down to timing and support systems. A person who experiences trauma but has people around them who help process those feelings might heal and move forward. Someone who faces the same trauma alone, especially as a child, is much more likely to develop that emotional armor that never comes off. Medical trauma plays a role too, though people talk about it less. Kids who spend months in hospitals, adults who survive serious accidents, or anyone who's had to endure painful medical procedures sometimes develop what doctors call medical dissociation. They learn to disconnect from their body and emotions to survive physical pain, and sometimes that disconnection becomes permanent. Work environments can push people toward emotional numbness as well. First responders, healthcare workers, and military personnel often develop controlled emotional detachment as a survival skill. The problem comes when they can't turn those feelings back on when they go home. What helps them function in crisis mode makes their personal relationships suffer. Cultural expectations add another layer to this emotional shutdown. Some communities treat emotional expression like a luxury they can't afford. Others see feelings as weakness or self-indulgence. Growing up in environments where emotional needs consistently come last teaches people that their feelings don't matter. The scariest part? Most people don't realize they're becoming emotionless until it's already happened. The walls get built brick by brick, day by day, until one morning they wake up and realize they can't remember the last time they felt genuinely excited, sad, or even angry about anything important. Understanding why people become emotionless matters, because it reveals something crucial. This isn't usually a choice, it's a response. But recognizing the reasons behind emotional shutdown opens up questions about whether these walls can ever come down, and what it might take to make that happen. When someone seems completely disconnected from the world around them, like they're watching life through bulletproof glass, there might be more going on than meets the eye. Mental health professionals have a name for one particular pattern that creates this kind of emotional distance: schizoid personality disorder. People with this condition aren't just quiet or shy. They genuinely prefer being alone over spending time with others. Not because they're scared of rejection or worried about saying the wrong thing. They simply find social interactions exhausting and pointless. While most of us get some kind of boost from hanging out with friends or family, these individuals feel drained instead of energized. Here's where it gets interesting. They don't seem to care about praise or criticism. Tell them they did an amazing job on a project. Blank stare. Point out their mistakes. Same reaction. Both responses carry equal weight, which is basically no weight at all. Makes sense, right? If you don't find much value in social connections, why would social feedback matter? But the weird part is how they handle activities that most people enjoy. Group events, parties, team sports, even casual hangouts feel like chores to them. They'd rather read a book, work on a solo hobby, or just sit quietly than join in on group fun. It's not that they're actively avoiding people out of fear. They're genuinely more comfortable in their own space. Then there's the empathy gap. When someone around them is clearly upset, stressed, or going through a tough time, they often don't pick up on these emotional cues. Not because they're trying to be cruel or dismissive. Their brains just don't process other people's emotional signals the same way. Someone could be crying right next to them, and they might not realize anything's wrong unless it's spelled out directly. Let's not forget how this looks from the outside. Co-workers might describe them as robotic or cold. Family members often feel like they're talking to a wall. Friends eventually stop trying to include them because the lack of response feels like rejection, even though it's not meant that way. The tricky thing about schizoid personality disorder is that it's often misunderstood. People assume these individuals are depressed, antisocial, or going through a rough patch. Well, depression can make someone withdraw, but it usually comes with sadness, hopelessness, or other strong negative feelings. Antisocial behavior involves actively going against social norms or hurting others. This is different entirely. These individuals aren't necessarily unhappy with their lifestyle. They're not plotting against anyone or breaking rules for the thrill of it. They've simply found a way of living that works for them, even if it looks strange to everyone else. Their emotional thermostat is set to a steady, cool temperature, and they're generally fine with that setting. Dating and romantic relationships present unique challenges. The typical courtship rituals that most people enjoy. Mythic dinners, expressing affections feel awkward and forced. Their partners often feel like they're in a relationship with someone who's physically present but emotionally absent. Not exactly the recipe for lasting romance. And the workplace dynamics can be complicated too. On one hand, they're often reliable employees who don't get caught up in office drama or gossip. They stick to their tasks without getting distracted by interpersonal conflicts. But they might miss important social cues from bosses or colleagues, or fail to participate in team-building activities that could help their career advancement. The question that comes up frequently is whether this emotional distance is permanent. Unlike some other personality patterns that can shift over time or with therapy, schizoid traits tend to be pretty stable. These individuals have usually been this way since early adulthood, and it's become their normal way of moving through the world. But here's what's really fascinating. While they might seem unreachable, they're not necessarily suffering. Many live perfectly functional lives, hold steady jobs, and maintain at least some relationships, even if they're not particularly close ones. They've found ways to navigate a social world while staying true to their preference for emotional distance. The key difference between someone with schizoid personality disorder and other types of emotional distance is choice and comfort level. These individuals aren't trying to change or reconnect with their feelings. They're not looking for ways to become more social or emotionally expressive. This is simply who they are, and they're generally okay with it. This raises an important point about the brain itself and how it processes emotional information differently from person to person. Some people's neurological wiring creates these patterns naturally, while others develop emotional distance as a response to life experiences. Understanding these brain differences helps explain why some individuals seem naturally untouchable, while others become that way over time. Ever wonder why some people's brains just work differently when it comes to feelings? The answer lies deep inside their heads, literally. Scientists have been poking around in there for decades, and what they've found is pretty fascinating. When researchers stick emotionless people into brain scanners, something interesting shows up. Their amygdala, that's the brain's alarm system for emotions, often lights up less than everyone else's. Think of it like having a smoke detector with dying batteries. It's still there, still functional, but it's not as sensitive to what's happening around it. Makes sense, right? But here's where it gets really wild. The prefrontal cortex, which is basically your brain's CEO making all the executive decisions, sometimes works overtime in these folks. While most people's emotions and logic duke it out, emotionless individuals often have their logical brain winning by a landslide. It's like having a really strict boss who never lets the creative department speak up during meetings. Then there's the whole hormone situation, which is messier than you might expect. Trauma doesn't just mess with your head psychologically, it literally rewires your chemical factory. People who've been through serious stuff often have cortisol levels that are completely out of whack. Cortisol is your stress hormone, and when it's been cranked up to 11 for months or years, your body eventually says nope and starts shutting down emotional responses as a survival mechanism. And the weird part is, this actually makes biological sense. Your brain is basically trying to protect you by turning down the volume on feelings that might overwhelm you. It's like having a bouncer at the club of your emotions, deciding what gets in and what doesn't. Let's not forget about genetics, because apparently you can inherit emotional detachment, like you inherit your dad's terrible jokes. Research shows certain gene variations make people more likely to develop what scientists call callous unemotional traits. These aren't just fancy words for being mean, they describe people who genuinely struggle to connect with feelings, both their own and others. The COMT gene is particularly interesting here. It controls how quickly your brain breaks down dopamine, that feel-good chemical. Some people have a version that clears dopamine super fast, which can make emotional experiences feel less intense. It's like having a really efficient janitor cleaning up the party before you even realize it started. But wait, there's more complexity brewing under the surface. Chronic stress literally changes your brain structure over time. The hippocampus, which helps process memories and emotions, can actually shrink when bombarded with stress hormones year after year. Meanwhile, the parts responsible for hypervigilance and threat detection grow stronger. Your brain essentially becomes a fortress designed to spot danger, not to feel joy. Mental health disorders show their own unique fingerprints on brain scans too. People with schizoid personality disorder often have different connectivity patterns between brain regions that handle social information. It's not that these areas are broken, they're just not talking to each other as much as they do in other people's brains. Depression can also flatten emotional responses, but through a different mechanism. The brain's reward circuits get sluggish, making it harder to feel pleasure or excitement about anything. Even good news bounces off like rain on a windshield. What's particularly fascinating is how early life experiences literally sculpt brain development. Kids who grow up in emotionally neglectful environments don't just learn to hide their feelings, their brains actually develop different wiring patterns. The neural pathways for emotional expression and recognition don't get as much practice, so they remain underdeveloped. This isn't permanent doom and gloom though. The brain has this amazing thing called neuroplasticity, which basically means it can rewire itself throughout your entire life. New experiences, therapy, and even certain medications can help strengthen those emotional circuits that got left behind during development. The body's nervous system plays a huge role too. Some emotionless people have what's called a dysregulated autonomic nervous system. This controls automatic functions like heart rate and breathing, but it also influences how intensely you feel emotions. When this system is stuck in shutdown mode from past trauma, emotions get dampened across the board. Scientists have even found that some people produce different amounts of oxytocin and vasopressin, hormones linked to bonding and empathy. Lower levels can make it genuinely harder to connect with others emotionally, not out of choice but due to brain chemistry. All this brain science reveals something crucial. Being emotionless often isn't a character flaw or a choice. It's frequently the result of very real, measurable differences in how someone's brain and body process the world around them. Understanding these biological foundations becomes essential when we consider how cultural expectations shape what we consider normal emotional expression. Which brings us to our next exploration. From the moment we take our first breath, society hands us a rulebook. Don't cry too loud. Don't get too excited. Keep it together. What's fascinating is how these invisible rules shape who we become, especially when it comes to showing emotions. Growing up, most of us heard phrases that stuck like glue. Big boys don't cry. Stop being so dramatic. Act your age. These aren't just throwaway comments from tired parents. They're cultural programming that runs so deep, we don't even realize we're following the script. Take a typical playground scene. A 6-year-old boy falls off his bike and scrapes his knee. His dad rushes over, but instead of offering comfort, he says, "You're fine, shake it off." Meanwhile, when his sister gets the same scrape, she gets a hug and a band-aid with cartoon characters. Both kids are learning powerful lessons about what emotions are acceptable and which ones need to be buried. The rules get stricter as we age. High school becomes a masterclass in emotional suppression. Show too much enthusiasm. You're weird. Get upset about something. You're being dramatic. Care too much about grades. You're a tryhard. The safest bet becomes showing nothing at all. But here's where it gets really interesting. Different cultures have wildly different emotional rulebooks. In some Asian cultures, maintaining composure isn't just preferred, it's practically sacred. Public emotional displays can bring shame not just to you but to your entire family. Meanwhile, in Mediterranean cultures, passionate expressions are part of daily life. Same human emotions, completely different rules about expressing them. The workplace adds another layer of complexity. Corporate America loves the myth of the rational decision maker. Emotions are messy. They complicate quarterly reports. They make meetings longer. The person who stays cool under pressure gets promoted, while the one who shows genuine concern about layoffs gets labeled as too emotional for leadership. Then there's the gender divide that nobody wants to talk about openly. Men face a particularly brutal set of rules. Anger, that's acceptable, even expected sometimes. But sadness, fear, or vulnerability, those emotions get you labeled as weak faster than you can say toxic masculinity. Women get their own impossible maze. Too emotional and they're hysterical, not emotional enough and they're cold or calculating. Religious and social institutions pile on their own expectations. Turn the other cheek. Suffering builds character. Good people don't get angry. These messages create people who genuinely believe that feeling certain emotions makes them bad or wrong. What's really wild is how these cultural rules become internalized. People don't just hide their emotions from others, they start hiding them from themselves. The kid who got told to toughen up grows into an adult who literally can't access their feelings anymore. It's not a choice at that point. The emotional pathways have been rewired. Social media has thrown gasoline on this fire. Everyone's curating their emotional image online. Happy vacation photos, success celebrations, carefully crafted vulnerability that still looks polished. Real emotions, the messy, complicated, inconvenient ones, don't fit into Instagram squares or LinkedIn posts. The strangest part, many cultures that suppress individual emotional expression still have collective emotional outlets. Sports stadiums where grown men cry over touchdowns. Religious ceremonies with intense communal feelings. Funerals where grief is not just allowed but expected. It's like society says, you can have emotions but only at designated times and places. Schools rarely teach emotional literacy. We learn algebra and history, but nobody explains how to identify what you're feeling or how to express it appropriately. Kids who naturally struggle with emotions get no roadmap. They just learn to mimic what they see, which is often other people hiding their true feelings. Professional settings make this even more complicated. Therapy is becoming more acceptable, but many workplaces still treat mental health like a dirty secret. Taking a sick day for the flu is fine. Taking one for overwhelming anxiety, that requires careful navigation. The weird part is how these cultural rules create exactly what they claim to prevent. By teaching people to suppress emotions, we end up with adults who explode inappropriately or shut down completely. The emotions don't disappear, they just go underground and cause different problems. Some people become so good at following these rules that they forget they're following them at all. They genuinely believe they don't have strong emotions, when really they've just become experts at suppression. It's like emotional muscle memory, so automatic they don't even realize they're doing it. What makes this even more complicated is that some of these cultural expectations do serve purposes. Staying calm in emergencies saves lives. Not every fleeting emotion needs to be shared with everyone. But there's a difference between emotional regulation and emotional extinction. Understanding how cultural programming shapes emotional expression helps explain why some people seem completely untouchable. But the deeper question remains, what happens when these learned behaviors become so ingrained that they're no longer a choice? Trauma leaves marks you can't see. While some people cry, scream, or fall apart after something terrible happens, others do the exact opposite. They shut down completely. It's like their emotional system hits an emergency off switch and never quite finds its way back on. Here's something that might surprise you: over 60% of adults report experiencing at least one major traumatic event before they turned 18. That's more than half of everyone walking around out there. The math is staggering when you think about it. your neighbor, your boss, that quiet person at the coffee shop. Chances are high they've been through something that changed how they handle feelings forever. But here's where it gets interesting. Not everyone who goes through trauma becomes emotionally numb. Some people become more emotional, not less. They might cry at commercials or feel overwhelmed by small setbacks. The brain's response to trauma is like a lottery you never wanted to win, unpredictable and life-changing. When someone experiences abuse, neglect, or a devastating loss during childhood, their developing brain makes a survival calculation. Feelings hurt. Caring about people who might leave or hurt you is dangerous. The solution: turn off the emotional tap. What starts as a smart survival strategy during a crisis can become a permanent way of being in the world. Take Sarah, who watched her parents fight violently every night until she was 12. By age 10, she learned that staying calm and invisible kept her safe. She stopped reacting to the screaming, the thrown dishes, the threats. Her friends at school thought she was naturally cool under pressure. Really, she was just practicing emotional survival every single day. Then there's the aftermath effect that nobody talks about. After surviving something terrible, many people become convinced their emotions can't be trusted. They remember feeling scared when they should have felt angry, or guilty when they should have felt sad. The emotional compass gets so scrambled that shutting it off entirely feels safer than risking another emotional mistake. Childhood emotional neglect works differently, but creates similar results. These aren't kids who got hit or screamed at. They're the ones whose parents were physically present but emotionally absent. Picture a child running to show mom their drawing, only to get a distracted "That's nice, honey," while she scrolls through her phone. Do this enough times and the child learns a harsh lesson. Feelings don't matter, and showing them is pointless. The weird part is how this emotional shutdown can look like strength to other people. Adults who survived emotional neglect often become the friends everyone turns to during a crisis. They're calm, logical, and won't fall apart when you need them most. What others see as impressive emotional stability is actually a well-practiced skill learned through years of not being allowed to have emotional needs. Military combat, serious accidents, medical emergencies, sudden deaths, these adult traumas can flip the emotional switch just as effectively as childhood ones. A person might go through 30 years of normal emotional responses, then experience something so overwhelming that their brain decides feelings are a luxury they can no longer afford. Veterans often describe this phenomenon. They return from deployment, able to handle any crisis with perfect calm, but they can't feel excited about a birthday party or sad during a movie. Their emotional range got compressed into a narrow band of practical responses, useful in battle, isolating in civilian life. Medical trauma creates its own version of emotional numbing, spending months in hospitals, receiving devastating diagnoses, watching your body fail. These experiences teach some people that hope and fear are equally pointless emotions. They learn to approach their own health problems with the detached interest of a scientist studying someone else's case. But perhaps the most overlooked trauma connection involves witnessing someone else's emotional pain repeatedly. Children who grow up caring for mentally ill parents, people who work in emergency rooms, individuals who become the family crisis manager. They often develop emotional calluses, not because something terrible happened to them directly, but because they absorbed so much second-hand trauma that their own feelings got buried under everyone else's needs. The tricky thing about trauma-induced emotionlessness is how it can masquerade as other things. Teachers might label these kids as mature for their age. Employers might praise these adults for staying calm under pressure. The emotional numbing that started as a protective response gets reinforced by a world that rewards people who don't break down. What makes this especially complicated is how trauma survivors often don't trust their own healing process. When therapy or time starts to bring feelings back, it can feel dangerous rather than healthy. They've spent years or decades equating emotional numbness with safety. Feeling things again requires facing not just current emotions but all the ones they've been storing up while the switch was off. This creates a pattern that explains why some people seem so completely untouchable, because in many ways they had to become exactly that to survive what they went through. Their emotional fortress wasn't built by choice but by necessity, and understanding this changes how we see their behavior completely. Walk into any office meeting and watch what happens when someone cracks a joke. Most people laugh, smile, or at least acknowledge the humor with a grin. Then there's that one person who sits there with the same expression they had 5 minutes ago. No chuckle, no eye roll, nothing. That's your emotionless person in action. They don't join group celebrations either, while everyone else is gathered around Sarah's desk celebrating her promotion with cake and congratulations. The emotionless colleague might offer a brief good job and return to their computer. It's not that they hate Sarah or want her to fail, they just don't get caught up in the excitement that seems to energize everyone else. But here's where it gets interesting. These behaviors show up everywhere, not just at work. Take gossip for instance. Most people lean in when someone starts sharing juicy details about a mutual friend's breakup or drama. The emotionless person, they might listen politely, but you won't see them asking follow-up questions or sharing their own stories. They treat gossip like weather reports, information that exists, but doesn't require emotional investment. Then there's the communication style that makes people do double takes. While others might say, "I'm so sorry to hear about your tough day, that must be really hard for you," an emotionless person is more likely to respond with, "What are you planning to do about it?" Direct, logical, sometimes brutally honest. This directness often gets labeled as blunt or even rude, but that's usually not the intention. They're simply skipping the emotional cushioning that most conversations include. When a coworker complains about their workload, instead of offering sympathy, they might suggest specific solutions or point out obvious fixes. Makes sense from their perspective, right? But it can leave others feeling unheard or dismissed. Let's not forget how they handle their own emotional moments. Remember the last time you felt genuinely excited about something, maybe a vacation, a new relationship, or landing a great deal on something you wanted. Your voice probably got louder, you might have smiled bigger, or you called someone to share the news. Emotionless people experience these same positive events differently. They might mention their vacation plans in the same tone they'd use to discuss their grocery list. The weird part is how this affects their hobby choices too. While many people gravitate toward group activities, team sports, book clubs, game nights, emotionless individuals often prefer solitary pursuits. Reading, hiking alone, working on individual projects, or diving deep into specialized interests that don't require social interaction. It's not antisocial behavior exactly. It's more like they've found what works for them without needing other people's energy to make it enjoyable. Well, this creates some fascinating workplace dynamics. During high-stress situations, when everyone else is panicking or getting overwhelmed, the emotionless person often becomes the calm center of the storm. They're the ones asking practical questions. What's our deadline? What resources do we have? What's the next step? While others are processing the emotional weight of the crisis, they're already moving toward solutions. And the weird part is how they handle criticism and praise equally. Tell them they did an amazing job on a project, and they might simply say thanks and move on. Point out their mistakes, and you'll get the same measured response. Both positive and negative feedback get processed through the same logical filter, without the emotional highs and lows that most people experience. But here's what throws people off the most. They often seem to miss emotional cues that others pick up automatically. When a colleague is clearly upset about something, most people notice the signs: the quiet voice, the slumped shoulders, the distracted responses. The emotionless person might continue the conversation normally, not recognizing that the other person needs emotional support rather than logical discussion. This isn't necessarily because they don't care. It's more like they're operating with different emotional software. They might genuinely want to help, but their version of help looks like problem solving rather than emotional comfort. Then there is their approach to conflict. Most people either avoid confrontation or get emotionally charged during disagreements. Emotionless individuals tend to treat conflicts like puzzles to solve. They stick to facts, avoid personal attacks, and sometimes frustrate others by not getting worked up about issues that seem important. What's particularly striking is how consistent these behaviors remain across different situations. Whether they're at a funeral, a wedding, or a surprise party, their emotional temperature stays relatively stable. This consistency can be both reassuring and unsettling to others, depending on the context. The question becomes, what happens when these behavioral patterns start affecting their relationships and life opportunities? Because while this emotional detachment has its advantages, it also creates some significant challenges that can't be ignored. There's something almost mysterious about people who can't be shaken. While the rest of us are getting worked up over traffic jams, mean comments, or unexpected changes, emotionless people just don't. They watch drama unfold around them, like they're observing a nature documentary. Fascinating, but not their problem. Picture someone at work getting absolutely roasted by their boss in front of everyone. Most people would turn red, stammer, maybe even tear up. But the emotionless person, They'll listen, nod once, and respond with something like, "I understand your concerns. What specific changes would you like me to make?" No defensiveness, no hurt feelings, just cold, hard logic. It's like watching someone deflect bullets with their bare hands. This detachment isn't just impressive, it's practically a superpower in certain situations. When everyone else is panicking about a crisis, they're the ones thinking clearly. They don't waste mental energy on hurt feelings or wounded pride. Instead, they focus on solutions. Makes sense, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. Their unshakable nature often makes other people more emotional, not less. It's like they absorb all the chaos around them and somehow neutralize it. Ever notice how some people get more upset when their anger doesn't get a reaction? That's the emotionless person's secret weapon. They don't give others the emotional response they're expecting. Let's not forget how this plays out in arguments. Most of us get defensive when accused of something. We explain, justify, maybe even attack back. The emotionless person, they'll just state facts. "I completed the project by the deadline you gave me. Here's the email confirmation." No drama, no wounded feelings, just information. It drives emotional people absolutely crazy because there's nothing to grab onto, nothing to escalate. Then there's their relationship with stress itself. While the rest of us are losing sleep over what might happen, they're operating on a completely different frequency. High-pressure situations that would send most people into overdrive barely register on their emotional radar. They might acknowledge the stakes are high, but they don't internalize the stress the way others do. This detachment extends to personal attacks too. Call them names, question their character, spread rumors. They'll often respond with the same energy they'd use to discuss the weather. Not because they don't hear it, but because they don't assign it emotional value. It's just noise. The weird part is, this often makes the attacks stop faster than any emotional response would. Their immunity to manipulation is particularly striking. Emotional manipulation relies on triggering feelings: guilt, fear, excitement, anger. But what happens when those triggers don't work? The manipulator is left standing there with useless tools, like trying to cut wood with a spoon. Emotionless people often don't even realize they're being manipulated because they're not processing the emotional bait. In crisis situations, this detachment becomes genuinely valuable. When everyone else is running around like their hair's on fire, emotionless people become anchors. They're the ones who remember to call 911, who think to grab the important documents, who can give clear directions to emergency responders. Their brain doesn't get hijacked by panic, so it keeps functioning normally. But why does this unbreakable quality develop in the first place? Sometimes it's learned behavior from growing up in chaotic environments where staying calm meant staying safe. Other times, it's the result of being disappointed or hurt so many times that emotional investment feels too risky. The brain basically says, "You know what, we're not doing this anymore." This emotional armor comes with some interesting side effects. They rarely get starstruck meeting famous people, don't get caught up in gossip or drama, and often seem immune to peer pressure. While their friends are getting swept up in the latest trend or controversy, emotionless people are watching from the sidelines, unmoved. Their poker face is legendary. Good luck trying to read their thoughts or predict their reactions. They've mastered the art of giving away nothing, which can be both intimidating and intriguing to others. Some people spend enormous amounts of energy trying to crack that code, to find the thing that will finally get an emotional reaction. The power of their detachment shows up in decision-making too. They're not swayed by emotional appeals or fear tactics. They want data, logic, clear cause and effect relationships. This makes them frustrating to deal with if you're used to influencing people through feelings, but incredibly reliable if you need someone who won't make impulsive choices. What's particularly striking is how their presence can actually calm chaotic situations. Like emotional fire extinguishers, they often diffuse tension simply by not adding to it. Their steady, unchanging energy can ground others who are spiraling. All this detachment and immunity to emotional turbulence might sound like pure advantage, but there's another side to this coin, one that reveals the hidden costs of being untouchable. Being emotionless might sound like a curse, but here's something most people miss completely. These seemingly untouchable individuals possess advantages that the rest of us can barely imagine. While everyone else gets swept up in emotional hurricanes, they're standing steady like lighthouses in a storm. Take decision-making, for instance. When your friend calls you crying about their relationship drama at 2 a.m., what happens? Your brain gets flooded with their emotions, your judgment gets cloudy, and you probably give advice based on how you feel rather than what actually makes sense. But someone who processes the world through logic, they hear the facts, analyze the patterns, and offer solutions that actually work. No drama, no bias, just clear thinking. This superpower becomes obvious in high-stakes situations. Emergency room doctors can't afford to break down every time they see someone hurt. Firefighters who rush into burning buildings aren't thinking about how scary it feels. They're calculating risks and executing plans. Military commanders making life or death decisions need ice-cold analysis, not warm fuzzy feelings. These professions literally depend on people who can shut off their emotional reactions when it matters most. Then there's the manipulation factor, which is fascinating when you think about it. Most of us fall for emotional manipulation without even realizing it. Someone raises their voice, and we get defensive. They give us the silent treatment, and we scramble to fix things. They guilt trip us, and we cave immediately. But emotionless people, good luck trying to push their buttons when they don't have any buttons to push. They see manipulation tactics for exactly what they are, cheap tricks that don't work on logical minds. Financial decisions reveal another massive advantage. While regular folks make impulse purchases because something made them feel good or panic sell their investments during market crashes, emotionally detached people stick to their plans. They don't buy things to fill emotional holes or make decisions based on fear and greed. Their bank accounts often reflect this disciplined approach, even if they never brag about it. Crisis situations expose the real value of emotional detachment. When everyone else is panicking during emergencies, these individuals become the calm voice of reason. They're the ones who remember to call 911 while others are screaming. They think about evacuation routes while others freeze up. They perform CPR while others stand around feeling helpless. Weird how the people we sometimes call cold often end up being the ones who save lives. Leadership roles often favor those who can separate feelings from facts. CEOs making layoff decisions can't let emotions cloud their judgment about company survival. Judges need to focus on evidence, not heartbreaking sob stories. Surgeons performing delicate operations can't let fear or sympathy shake their hands. These aren't heartless monsters. They're people whose ability to compartmentalize emotions makes them exceptionally good at jobs that require steady nerves. But here's where it gets really interesting. Emotionless people often make surprisingly loyal friends and partners, just in ways that catch others off guard. They won't shower you with dramatic declarations of love, but they'll show up consistently when you need them. They might not cry during your wedding, but they'll remember your anniversary every year without fail. Their care shows up in actions rather than words or expressions. Problem solving becomes their secret weapon. When your computer crashes and you're having a meltdown, they're already researching solutions. When your car breaks down and you're stressed about money, they're comparing repair costs to replacement options. They don't waste energy on emotional reactions that don't fix anything. They channel that energy into actually solving problems. Their resistance to peer pressure creates another unexpected strength. They don't make bad decisions just because everyone else is doing it. They don't follow trends that don't make sense. They don't join in gossip sessions that waste time and hurt people. This independence often leads them to make choices that seem weird in the moment, but look brilliant in hindsight. The really remarkable thing about emotionally detached people is how they handle criticism and praise. Insults bounce off them like water off a duck's back, but compliments don't go to their heads either. This emotional stability means they can take feedback objectively, learn from mistakes without spiraling into shame, and keep improving without getting derailed by what others think. Their calm presence becomes magnetic in chaotic environments. People naturally gravitate toward those who seem unshakable when everything else feels uncertain. They become the eye of the storm that others seek shelter in, even if those same people might find them puzzling during peaceful times. Yet despite all these advantages, there's another side to this coin that most people never consider. These strengths come with hidden costs that can create entirely different kinds of challenges. Being emotionless might sound like a superpower, but it comes with a hefty price tag. The very traits that make these people seem unbreakable can also make their lives surprisingly difficult. What looks like strength from the outside often feels like a prison from the inside. Friendships become an uphill battle when you can't connect on an emotional level. Most people bond through shared feelings, laughing together, complaining about work, celebrating victories, or venting frustrations. But emotionless individuals often sit on the sidelines of these exchanges like spectators at a game they don't understand. They might nod politely when someone shares exciting news, but their flat response leaves the other person feeling deflated. The weird part is that they're not trying to be mean, they just don't have the emotional vocabulary or automatic responses that make friendships flow naturally. Over time, people stop inviting them to social gatherings, not out of malice, but because their presence can feel like a wet blanket on group energy. It's like trying to start a fire with damp wood, technically possible, but exhausting. Then there's the romantic minefield. Dating requires vulnerability, passion, and emotional intimacy, all things that emotionless people find incredibly challenging. They might care deeply about their partner, but struggle to show it in ways that feel meaningful. When their girlfriend gets a promotion, a simple good job doesn't quite capture the celebration moment she's hoping for. When she's upset about family drama, his logical solutions feel cold instead of supportive. Physical affection becomes another stumbling block. Most emotionless people aren't naturally touchy-feely. They might stiffen during hugs or forget to hold hands. Their partner often feels like they're dating a polite stranger rather than someone who's truly invested. The relationship starts feeling one-sided, even when both people are genuinely trying. But why do conversations become such minefields? Feedback is particularly tricky territory. When someone says, "You hurt my feelings," an emotionless person might respond with confusion rather than apology. They genuinely don't understand how their neutral comment caused emotional pain. They tend to focus on the literal words they said rather than the emotional impact they had. This creates a frustrating loop where the hurt person feels dismissed, and the emotionless person feels unfairly accused. Let's not forget how others perceive them in professional settings. While their logical approach can be valuable, it can also make them seem uncaring or ruthless. When layoffs happen, they might discuss the business necessity without acknowledging the human cost. Colleagues start viewing them as cold or calculating, even if they're just processing the situation differently. They miss out on workplace friendships and mentorship opportunities, because people find them hard to connect with. Well, here's where it gets really challenging. They often don't realize they're being misunderstood. Someone might storm off after a conversation, and they're left genuinely puzzled about what went wrong. They replay the interaction looking for logical errors in their communication, missing the emotional undercurrents entirely. It's like being constantly out of sync with the world around them. The isolation builds over time. Family gatherings become performances where they try to fake appropriate responses. They learn to say, "I'm sorry for your loss" at funerals and "congratulations" at weddings, but these feel like scripted lines rather than genuine expressions. The effort of constantly translating between their internal experience and social expectations becomes exhausting. And the weird part is how this affects their self-perception. Many emotionless people start to see themselves as fundamentally broken or different. They watch others cry at movies or get excited about weekend plans and wonder what's wrong with them. Some become convinced they're bad people because they don't feel things the right way. This self-doubt can lead to even more withdrawal and isolation. Trust becomes another casualty. When you struggle to read emotional cues, you miss important information about people's intentions and feelings. They might stick with obviously problematic relationships because they don't pick up on red flags that others would notice immediately. Or they might end good relationships prematurely because they misinterpret normal emotional expressions as overreactions. The professional world presents its own unique challenges too. Jobs that require emotional intelligence, teaching, counseling, customer service, become nearly impossible. They might excel at the technical aspects but struggle with the human elements that are often just as important. Performance reviews highlight their lack of team chemistry or difficulty with client relationships. Makes sense, right? The very detachment that protects them from emotional pain also blocks them from emotional joy, connection, and understanding. They're like people watching life through bulletproof glass, safe but also separated from the full human experience. The question becomes whether this protective barrier is worth the cost. Can someone learn to lower these walls without losing their emotional stability? There might be ways to find that balance, but it requires understanding what makes change possible in the first place. Here's the thing about emotionless people. They're probably the most misunderstood group walking among us. Everyone has an opinion about them, but most of those opinions are dead wrong. The biggest myth, that these people wake up every morning choosing to be cold, wrong. Most emotionless individuals didn't sign up for this. They're not sitting in their rooms practicing their best stone face in the mirror. Many genuinely struggle with expressing what they feel inside, even when they desperately want to connect with others. People love to throw around diagnoses like confetti at a parade. "Oh, he's clearly a psychopath. She must have serious mental issues." But being emotionless doesn't automatically mean someone has a mental illness. That's like saying everyone who's quiet must be depressed. Sometimes people are just wired differently. and that's perfectly normal. Then there's the assumption that emotionless equals heartless. Completely false. Many of these individuals feel emotions, they just express them differently. It's like having a radio that picks up all the stations but can't figure out how to adjust the volume or change the channel. The signal is there, but the output gets scrambled. Here's where it gets interesting. Some emotionless people show incredible loyalty and kindness, just not in the ways we expect. They won't cry at your wedding, but they'll drive 3 hours to help you move apartments. They won't gush over your promotion, but they'll remember exactly what you said about wanting that job 6 months ago and quietly celebrate your success. The robot stereotype needs to die. People assume emotionless individuals can't form relationships or don't care about others. Not true. They might not send heart emojis or write love letters, but they show care through actions. They're the ones who remember you hate mushrooms on pizza without making a big deal about it. They notice when you're struggling, even if they don't know how to comfort you with words. Society has this weird obsession with emotional displays. We think bigger reactions mean deeper feelings, but that's backwards thinking. Some of the most caring people express themselves through consistency rather than dramatics. They're reliable, honest, and present, just not theatrical about it. Well, here's another shocker. Many emotionless people actually feel too much, not too little. They learn to shut down because emotions felt overwhelming or dangerous. Imagine having feelings so intense they hurt, so you build walls to protect yourself. From the outside, those walls look like coldness. From the inside, they're survival tools. The workplace myth drives me crazy. Everyone assumes emotionless people make perfect employees because they're professional. Sure, they handle stress well and make logical decisions, but they also struggle with team dynamics and office politics. They miss social cues that oil the wheels of workplace relationships. Being emotionally detached isn't always the superpower people think it is. And let's talk about the untouchable label. People use this word like these individuals are made of stone, but many emotionless people desperately want connection. They just don't know how to build it or maintain it. They're often more touchable than anyone realizes. They just need different approaches. The therapy myth bugs me too. People assume all emotionless individuals need professional help to fix themselves. Sometimes therapy helps, absolutely, but not everyone wants or needs to change. Some people function perfectly well with their emotional style. They're not broken machines waiting for repair. Movies and TV shows don't help either. They portray emotionless characters as either brilliant detectives or dangerous criminals. Nothing in between. Real emotionless people are accountants, teachers, parents, and friends. They're ordinary humans who happen to express feelings differently. Parents of emotionless children often panic, thinking they failed somehow. They search for signs of warmth like treasure hunters. But these kids might show love by sharing their favorite snacks or remembering important dates. Different doesn't mean deficient. The biggest misconception of all, that being emotionless is permanent and absolute. People aren't light switches, completely on or off emotionally. Most exist somewhere on a spectrum. They might be emotionally flat in some situations but surprisingly expressive in others. Context matters. Relationships matter. Safety matters. What's fascinating is how wrong we get their motivations. We assume they're selfish or uncaring, when many are actually protecting themselves or others. They learned that emotions cause problems, so they minimize them. It's not callousness, it's strategy. The truth is, emotionless people are far more complex and feeling than we give them credit for. They're not trying to be mysterious or difficult. They're navigating the world with different tools than the rest of us. But before we completely rewrite our understanding of emotionless people, we need to look at how society shapes our perceptions of them and how some have become unlikely heroes in our culture. When most people think of emotionless characters, Sherlock Holmes probably comes to mind first. Arthur Conan Doyle created a detective who treats human emotions like annoying background noise. Holmes examines dead bodies with the same expression he'd use to order coffee. He solves murders while others are still processing the shock. The guy literally keeps body parts in his refrigerator for experiments and thinks that's perfectly normal behavior. But here's what's fascinating about Holmes. He's not actually heartless. He just prioritizes logic over feelings every single time. When Watson gets injured, Holmes doesn't panic or cry. Instead, he methodically figures out how to fix the problem. That's classic emotionless behavior right there. Facts over feelings, solutions over sympathy. Then there's the real world where some business leaders have built empires partly because they don't let emotions cloud their judgment. Take someone like Bill Gates during Microsoft's early days. Former employees described him as brutally logical during meetings. He'd tear apart ideas without worrying about hurt feelings. When competitors tried to intimidate him, he'd respond with data and strategy, not anger or fear. That detached approach helped him make decisions that emotional people might have avoided. Steve Jobs was similar in many ways. He could fire people without the emotional weight that would paralyze most managers. Was he mean? Maybe. But his ability to separate personal feelings from business decisions played a huge role in Apple's success. He'd reject products that teams spent months developing, then move on to the next meeting like nothing happened. Professional athletes offer another interesting example. Think about Tom Brady during Super Bowl games. The guy's down by 10 points with 2 minutes left, and his face shows about as much emotion as a statue. While teammates are stressed and fans are screaming, he's calculating plays and managing the clock. That's emotionless behavior working perfectly under pressure. Tennis players like Novak Djokovic have mastered this too. They can lose a crucial point and immediately reset for the next one. No dwelling, no visible frustration that gives opponents an advantage. They've trained themselves to disconnect from the emotional roller coaster that destroys other players' games. But wait, there's a darker side to these examples that's worth mentioning. Some of history's most effective leaders were also emotionally detached in disturbing ways. They could make decisions about war or policy without being overwhelmed by the human cost. This isn't necessarily admirable, but it shows how emotionlessness can be incredibly powerful, for better or worse. Movies and TV shows love emotionless characters because they're fascinating to watch. Think about characters like Spock from Star Trek, who literally comes from a culture that suppresses emotions, or more recently, characters like Sherlock in the BBC series, who treats human feelings like a foreign language he never bothered to learn. These characters work because they do things most people couldn't. They stay calm when everyone else falls apart. The weird part is how audiences react to these characters. People are simultaneously attracted to and frustrated by their emotional detachment. We admire their clarity and strength, but we also want them to crack, to show they're human underneath all that logic. Real-life emergency responders often develop similar traits. Paramedics, firefighters, and ER doctors learn to disconnect emotionally from traumatic situations. They can work on a car accident victim while making casual conversation with their partner. It's not that they don't care, they've just learned that emotions can interfere with saving lives. Military personnel, especially those in combat roles, often display these characteristics too. They're trained to compartmentalize feelings and focus on mission objectives. A soldier might lose a close friend in battle, then continue fighting without missing a beat. That's not callousness, it's survival. News anchors provide another interesting case study. They can report devastating stories, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, mass casualties, while maintaining the same neutral expression throughout their entire broadcast. They switch from reporting deaths to discussing weather updates without any emotional transition. That takes serious emotional control. Athletes in individual sports like golf or tennis often exhibit similar traits. Tiger Woods was famous for his emotionless expression during crucial putts. Win or lose, his face rarely betrayed what he was thinking or feeling. That poker face became part of his intimidation factor. But here's the thing that makes all these examples so compelling. Most of these people aren't naturally emotionless. They've learned to control their emotional responses for specific purposes. They've developed skills that allow them to function effectively in high-pressure situations where emotions might be counterproductive. What's really interesting is how society celebrates these traits in certain contexts but criticizes them in others. We praise the surgeon who stays calm during a life-threatening operation, but we might judge a parent who responds to their child's excitement with the same emotional detachment. The question becomes, can people who seem naturally emotionless learn to access and express their feelings when it would actually benefit them? And more importantly, what does it take to reach someone who's built walls so high that even they've forgotten how to climb over them? Here's the question everyone wants answered: can these seemingly untouchable people actually change? The short answer might surprise you. Yes, but it's complicated. Most emotionless people aren't stuck forever in their detached state. However, the path to emotional connection looks nothing like what you'd expect. It's not about forcing someone to cry at movies or suddenly becoming a hugger. Real change happens in much smaller, quieter ways. Therapy plays a huge role, but not the kind where you lie on a couch talking about your childhood for years. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps people recognize when emotions show up, even if they're barely noticeable. Many emotionless individuals do feel things. They just learn to ignore or suppress those feelings so completely that they forgot how to notice them. A good therapist acts like an emotional detective, helping them spot the tiny signals their body sends when happiness, sadness, or anger appears. The weird part is that change often starts with trust, not feelings. When emotionless people find someone who doesn't judge them for being different, something shifts. They stop using as much energy to maintain their emotional walls. This person might be a therapist, a patient friend, or even a romantic partner who understands that love doesn't always look like grand gestures and tearful declarations. Building this trust takes forever. We're talking months or years, not weeks. But here's what's fascinating. Once that foundation exists, emotionless people often surprise themselves with what they're capable of feeling. They might notice they actually enjoy certain activities, or realize they do care when someone they trust gets hurt. Practicing empathy works like exercise for an unused muscle. Therapists often give homework assignments that sound almost silly. Notice when your coworker seems stressed this week. Try to guess what emotion someone on TV is feeling. These small exercises slowly rebuild the connection between recognizing emotions in others and understanding emotions in themselves. Then there's the environment factor. Emotionless people thrive in supportive spaces where they're not expected to perform emotions they don't feel. Ironically, the less pressure they face to act normal, the more likely they are to naturally express whatever emotions do exist inside them. It's like trying to see a shy animal in the wild. The harder you look, the more it hides. Some changes happen by accident. A person who's been emotionally detached for decades might adopt a pet and slowly discover they're capable of genuine affection. Or they might face a crisis where their usual logical approach isn't enough, forcing them to tap into feelings they didn't know they had. Life has a way of sneaking up on people who think they've got everything figured out. But let's be honest about the challenges. Many emotionless people don't want to change. Their detachment protected them during difficult times, and giving up that protection feels dangerous. Why would someone choose to feel pain, disappointment, or anxiety when they've successfully avoided those emotions for years? Change requires them to believe that feeling everything, including the bad stuff, is worth it for the possibility of experiencing joy, love, or excitement. Progress looks different for everyone. One person might start making eye contact during conversations. Another might begin asking friends how they're feeling, genuinely wanting to know the answer. Some discover they can express care through actions rather than words, bringing soup to a sick friend or remembering important dates. These might seem like tiny steps, but for someone who's been emotionally disconnected, they represent massive shifts. The most successful changes happen when emotionless people work with their natural tendencies instead of fighting them. Instead of trying to become emotionally expressive, they might focus on becoming better listeners. Rather than learning to show excitement, they might practice being present during happy moments. It's about expansion, not complete transformation. Family members and friends often get frustrated because change happens so slowly. They want dramatic breakthroughs and obvious emotional displays. But real progress is subtle, a slightly warmer tone of voice, a moment of genuine laughter, or asking for help when they usually handle everything alone. The people closest to emotionless individuals need patience and the ability to celebrate very small victories. Medication sometimes helps, especially when depression or anxiety disorders contribute to emotional numbing. But pills can't teach someone how to express feelings they've been suppressing for years. The most effective treatment combines medical support with therapy and patient relationships. Here's what might shock you most. Many emotionless people who do change report that they were always feeling more than others realized. They just needed permission and tools to let those feelings show. The emotions were there all along, buried under years of protection and habit. The journey from emotionless to emotionally connected is possible, but it requires understanding that not everyone needs to become an emotional open book. Sometimes the goal is simply feeling safe enough to let a little bit of warmth slip through the cracks. What can we learn from watching these transformations unfold? Most of us spend our lives trying to avoid becoming like the emotionless people we've been talking about. But here's the twist. Nobody talks about. These seemingly untouchable individuals actually hold some of life's most valuable lessons. Take their ability to stay calm during chaos. While everyone else is panicking about a crisis at work, the emotionless person sits there, analyzing the situation step by step. No drama, no meltdowns, just pure problem-solving mode. That's a skill worth learning, right? The rest of us could use a dose of that steadiness when our world feels like it's falling apart. Their logical decision-making process is another hidden gem. When faced with a tough choice, Most people get tangled up in feelings and fears. Should I take this job? Will people think I'm crazy? What if I fail? But emotionless people cut through all that noise. They look at facts. They weigh pros and cons. They make decisions based on reality, not emotions. And weirdly enough, they often end up making better choices because of it. Then there's their boundary-setting superpowers. These people don't get guilt-tripped into doing things they don't want to do. They say no without a 20-minute explanation. They don't feel obligated to fix everyone else's problems. While the rest of us are running around trying to please everyone, they're protecting their time and energy like it actually matters. Let's not forget their resistance to manipulation. Ever notice how some people can push your buttons and make you react exactly how they want? That doesn't work on emotionless people. They don't take the bait. They don't get sucked into pointless arguments. They stay focused on what actually matters instead of getting distracted by emotional games. Their approach to criticism is particularly fascinating. When someone attacks them or tries to tear them down, they don't crumble. They don't spend hours analyzing what went wrong or beating themselves up. They evaluate whether the criticism has merit, and either use it to improve or dismiss it completely. No middle ground of endless worry and self-doubt. But here's where it gets interesting. We can learn from these traits without becoming emotionally dead ourselves. It's about finding balance. You can practice staying calm in stressful situations while still feeling joy when good things happen. You can make logical decisions while still trusting your gut feelings. You can set boundaries while still showing compassion for others. The key is understanding that emotions don't always have to control us. Sometimes the most caring thing you can do is stay level-headed when everyone else is losing their minds. Sometimes the most helpful response is practical action instead of emotional reaction. Sometimes protecting yourself from toxic people is healthier than trying to fix them. Emotionless people also teach us about resilience in unexpected ways. They've often survived things that would break other people. Their detachment isn't always a flaw or mine. Sometimes it's armor that kept them alive. That's worth respecting, even if we don't fully understand it. Their directness in communication is another lesson hiding in plain sight. While most of us dance around difficult topics or sugarcoat bad news, they just say what needs to be said. No games, no hidden meanings, no wondering what they really meant. There's something refreshing about that honesty, even when it feels harsh. The weird part is how their presence can actually be calming for others. When you're spiraling about a problem, being around someone who doesn't feed into the drama can help you see things more clearly. They become a steady point of reference when everything else feels unstable. Understanding emotionless people also teaches us about human complexity. Not everyone processes the world the same way we do. Not everyone shows care through hugs and emotional support. Some people show they care by solving problems, offering practical help, or simply being reliable when others can't be. This recognition helps us become more accepting of different personality types. Instead of trying to force everyone into the same emotional mold, we can appreciate what each person brings to the table. The emotionless person might not cry at your graduation, but they'll probably help you figure out your next practical steps. Their example also shows us that survival comes in many forms. Some people survive by feeling everything deeply, others survive by feeling very little. Both approaches have value, and both deserve understanding rather than judgment. Maybe the biggest lesson is about authenticity. Emotionless people, for better or worse, are usually being genuine. They're not pretending to feel things they don't feel. They're not putting on an act to make others comfortable. In a world full of fake enthusiasm and performative emotion, that raw honesty has its own kind of integrity. The untouchable people among us aren't broken versions of everyone else. They're complex individuals with their own strengths, challenges, and ways of navigating life. By understanding them better, we understand ourselves better too.